Overthinking does not start because your mind is broken. It starts because your mind is trying to protect you. At some point, thinking ahead helped you survive. Anticipating danger mattered. The problem begins when thinking continues after it has lost its function. Overthinking is thought that outlives its usefulness. Most people believe they overthink because they care too much. That's not accurate. You overthink because you want certainty where none exists. The mind keeps looping because it is uncomfortable with unanswered questions. This is why overthinking feels compulsive. Each thought promises relief. None delivers it. Stoic philosophy understood this long before modern psychology. According to Epictetus, mental suffering comes from confusing what is within our control with what is not. Some things are up to you, others are not. Overthinking is what happens when the mind refuses to accept this boundary. You replay conversations because you want to control how you were perceived. You imagine future disasters because you want to control outcomes. You obsess over decisions because you want guarantees. But thinking does not create control. It only consumes attention. This is where most advice fails. Telling yourself to stop thinking does nothing, because overthinking is not a thinking problem. It is an attention problem. Thousands of thoughts pass through your mind every day. Only a few become loops. Those are the thoughts you keep returning to, not because they are true, but because they create the illusion of action. Attention feels like doing something. Stoicism does not ask you to silence your thoughts. It asks a more uncomfortable question. Why are you giving this thought authority? A thought is not an order. It is a suggestion. Epictetus would challenge you directly. If this is not within your control, why are you treating it as your responsibility? Overthinking is resistance disguised as preparation. It is the refusal to accept uncertainty, dressed up as problem-solving. The Stoic solution is not to think less, but to stop assigning false responsibility to the mind. When control is clarified, the loop weakens on its own. And this opens the door to the real practice, training attention, not thought. A mind loop survives only as long as attention keeps feeding it. This is why Stoicism begins with a strict division, not as theory, but as a daily filter. Epictetus defined two categories: what depends on you and what does not. This is not philosophy for comfort. It is a method for cutting mental noise at its root. What depends on you is limited. Your judgments, your intentions, your actions in the present moment. What does not depend on you is vast. Outcomes, other people's opinions, the future, chance, timing. Overthinking begins when the mind treats the second category as if it belonged to the first. You keep thinking because you believe thinking can change the outcome. But outcomes do not respond to thought. They respond to action, and often not even then. The Stoic move is simple but not easy. The moment a thought appears, you ask one question only: is this within my control? If the answer is no, the work is done, not solved, not reassured, released. This is where people misunderstand Stoicism. They think release means indifference. It does not. It means refusing to waste attention on what cannot be commanded. A mind loop feels urgent, but urgency is not authority. When you examine the loop, you often see this pattern: a future scenario imagined repeatedly, with no new information added. That repetition is not problem-solving. It is emotional avoidance. The Stoics did not argue with these thoughts. They did not replace them with positive ones. They simply removed their jurisdiction. If it is not mine to control, Epictetus taught, then it is not mine to carry. This is where loops begin to weaken, because the mind cannot sustain effort without justification. Once attention is withdrawn, the thought loses energy, not instantly, but inevitably. This is also why distraction fails. Distraction avoids the thought. Stoicism confronts it, then disarms it. You are not trying to stop the mind from speaking. You are deciding when it is no longer relevant. This requires a shift in identity. You stop seeing yourself as the manager of outcomes and start acting as the steward of attention. And attention, unlike outcomes, is always within your control. In the next section, we go deeper. How attention training actually works, why fighting thoughts strengthens them, and how Stoics practiced mental discipline without suppression. Overthinking cannot be defeated by force. The more you try to silence a thought, the more importance you give it. This is why Stoics never fought the mind directly. They trained where attention rests. Attention is like a spotlight. Thoughts appear constantly, but only the ones illuminated feel urgent. When a mind loop forms, the mistake is not the thought itself. The mistake is following it. Stoic practice teaches you to pause at the moment of engagement, not after 10 minutes of spiraling, but at the first pull. You notice the sensation before the story, tightness in the chest, pressure behind the eyes, restlessness. This is the signal. Instead of asking, "How do I stop this thought?" you ask, "Where is my attention right now?" Then you move it, deliberately. Not to distraction, but to something real and immediate. Your breath, the weight of your body, the task directly in front of you. This is not mindfulness as escape. It is attention as discipline. The Stoics believed the mind must be trained like a muscle. Left unattended, it obeys impulses. Trained, it obeys intention. This is why they emphasized daily practice, not insight. A single realization will not cure overthinking, but repeated redirection weakens the habit. Each time you refuse to follow a loop, you teach the mind something. This path leads nowhere, and the mind learns through repetition, not logic. Another critical mistake people make is believing that overthinking must be eliminated. It does not. Thoughts will still arise. The difference is that they no longer dominate. Stoicism aims for mental hierarchy, not mental silence. Some thoughts are allowed to speak. Others are acknowledged and dismissed, without anger, without fear. This is why Stoic calm feels grounded, not euphoric. It is the result of order, not positivity. When attention is trained, uncertainty becomes tolerable. Not comfortable, but survivable. And once uncertainty is survivable, the need to overthink collapses. The loop breaks not because the question was answered, but because it no longer demands an answer. This is the quiet power of Stoicism. Not controlling the mind, but refusing to be ruled by it. One reason overthinking feels endless is because the mind mistakes repetition for progress. If you replay a thought often enough, it feels like work is being done. But repetition without new input is not thinking. It is rumination. The Stoics were precise about this difference. Thinking serves action. Rumination replaces action. When the mind loops, it usually circles around a question that cannot be answered right now. What will happen? Did I make the right choice? What if I regret this? These are not practical questions. They are emotional ones. Stoicism does not try to answer them. It changes the standard by which questions are allowed to stay. A Stoic asks, "Does this thought improve my character or guide my next action?" If the answer is no, the thought is considered excess, not evil, not dangerous, just unnecessary. This is an important shift. Most people believe every thought deserves resolution. Stoicism rejects this assumption. Some thoughts deserve permission to pass. This is where mental discipline begins to feel counterintuitive. You allow uncertainty to remain open. You stop demanding closure from the future. This does not make you passive. It makes you precise. You act where action is possible. You wait where it is not. Overthinking collapses when the mind accepts this rhythm, because urgency fades when responsibility is clear. Another overlooked aspect: overthinking feeds on imagined selves. The version of you who fails, the version of you who is judged, the version of you who regrets. Stoics refused to live inside hypothetical identities. They anchored themselves in the present self, the only self that can act. Everything else was treated as fiction, not denied, but not obeyed. When you stop living mentally in imagined futures, the mind loses most of its material for loops, and this prepares us for the final layer before the conclusion. Why Stoicism focuses less on what you think and more on how you relate to thought itself. Overthinking finally loosens its grip when you stop identifying with the voice that produces it. This is the deepest Stoic move, and the one most people never reach. You assume that because a thought appears, it must be you. But Stoicism makes a sharp distinction. You are not your thoughts. You are the one who assents to them. A thought says, "This is a disaster." You decide whether that judgment is accepted. Epictetus was clear. Events are neutral, judgments are not. Overthinking is the habit of granting immediate assent to anxious judgments. You don't examine them, you obey them. Stoic freedom begins the moment you delay that obedience. Not by arguing, not by reassuring, but by withholding agreement. This is just an impression, nothing more. When you stop merging with thoughts, something subtle happens. Space appears. In that space, urgency weakens, emotion settles, choice returns. This is why Stoicism emphasizes character over comfort. The goal is not to feel calm at all times. The goal is to remain sovereign under pressure. Overthinking fades not because life becomes predictable, but because unpredictability no longer threatens your identity. You stop asking, "How do I make this feeling go away?" and start asking, "What is mine to do right now?" That question ends most loops instantly, not because it answers everything, but because it brings the mind back to reality. Stoicism does not promise peace through certainty. It offers peace through alignment. When attention is trained, when control is respected, when judgments are examined instead of obeyed, the mind no longer needs to run in circles, not free from thought, but free within thought. That is the Stoic way out of overthinking.